Running can be seen as something that's a selfish and personal pursuit, but so many Indigenous communities, including my own, we run for community. Being able to run for others and honor them in this way, just a beautiful ceremony in itself. Running can be seen as something that's a selfish and personal pursuit. But so many Indigenous communities, including my own, we run for community. It's embracing the joy that it is to have a body that can run. Being able to run for others and honor them in this way. Just a beautiful ceremony in itself. I'm Lydia. I'm a soil microbiologist and a runner and a daughter, a sister, and a fur mama.
One of the first races that I did here in Tucson, every year this woman would pass me in the hill. It was so consistent, I started remembering her every year. So by the third year, I went and introduced myself. I learned that she was a scientist. I learned that she worked with the Native Nations Institute. We talk about science. We talk about soil science.
My passion for running has really exposed me to seeing a lot of landscapes impacted by mining. When I see mines like this, it's overwhelming to think about the amount of destruction humans can create. And I also think about what my ancestors must have felt when this first began, right? And they probably felt some dose of sadness with that as well. But we're adaptive and we adapt to the changing environment and try to leave it better. It's like an ethic that we were raised with, so I know that my future children would be part of that as well. After I finished my bachelor's, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I kept on seeing these friends who were Indigenous, who were uniquely fighting mining projects in their communities. Mines are one of those things that you don't really notice until you begin to be trained to see them. And then I started to see them everywhere. Why do these exist? And why haven't they been dealt with or covered up? We have many people in our community who have been impacted by mining, and so I wanted to learn firsthand from friends and families what their experience was. So right now we're going to pick up my friend's dad, Alfred Urbina, and he's a really badass tribal lawyer, and he's gonna kind of talk to us about some of the mines in that area.
Hi, Lydia.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going swell.
And where are we driving to?
We are driving out into the desert to Twin Peaks. This is where I raised my family. It's basically people who maybe can't afford homes in Tucson, but they're able to raise their families out here with a little bit of space. It's called Twin Peaks. The one peak you can still see, and the second peak has been reduced to these mine tailings that we see here. I've always thought about the health impacts of living close to a mine, what it meant raising children next to the mine. You hear about the health effects of asthma, or you have other issues that have arisen in the communities that people connect to either tailings or the leaching of metals into the water table. Here in southern Arizona, there are mines that are on reservation land. There are also mines that are just off reservation land. We shouldn't settle for a conversation when we're talking about our future rights, not just an invitation to talk about something that's going to harm us, but the ability to affect that decision.
Copper is a great conductor of electricity, and unfortunately, the harvesting, the extraction of copper is an extremely destructive process, environmentally and to the people whose land is being affected and the communities who live in close proximity to those operations.
In a state like Arizona, 40% of mines are on or bordering tribal communities. When you begin to see these patterns of extraction industry not valuing indigenous lives or lands or waters or air, you feel a sense of erasure, that even just your ability to live a life as anyone wants to is not valued. In order to create the change in relation to mining issues, I thought I had to study it. So I pursued my PhD in environmental sciences with emphasis on mining reclamation so that I can understand the soil and the soil health on areas that are impacted by mining.
It is still a lonely place in academia as an Indigenous person, and a sometimes volatile space. There's significant lack of representation of Indigenous peoples as doctoral holders. For me, the reason why I got the degree was to have the degree, to get the seat at the table. The policy implications are that you begin to be able to shift policy.
The bigger part was feeling like I belonged in that space. And that comes from my own insecurities of being smart enough, but also from peers really saying aggressive things like, oh, you only got that because you're Native American. Having that plant a seed of fear within myself. Traditionally, Indigenous knowledge and ways of knowing have not been seen as legitimate science. And it was really in finding mentors who said you don't have to be one or the other, you don't have to be the person who exists in two worlds. You can bring them together and they're that much more powerful.
We often hear people talk about how either we're walking in two worlds or we're choosing one knowledge system over the other, but we're here. I'm sitting here, I'm in this place. I'm not walking in two worlds. This is my walk.
When you mine a pound of copper, 99% of that pound is going to be rejected as waste. And all that surrounding material that's in these slurries, those all become active mine tailings, and that's what I work on restoring. So in my dissertation work, I monitored a portion of land that was leased from the Tonatam Nation. They were really instrumental in deciding how they wanted to go about the reclamation process. They chose to invest heavily in taking soil from the desert area and putting on top of the mine waste, and then also in seeding with 32 different seed species based on traditional knowledge and plants that are native to the Sonoran Desert. And it really showed this robust resiliency of the ecosystem actually exceeding the vegetation cover of the natural desert ecosystem. When Native people are given the leeway to make decisions about our own homelands, we see really powerful examples of ecosystem resiliency.
Science combined with our Indigenous ways of knowing can bring us robust solutions for some of the challenges that we face now.
That's where I started to see that they could be braided together. "2020, I think, was a big year for everybody, but for me, it marked the culmination of my PhD journey. I was supposed to be done in May. It got extended because of COVID. The lab itself and the university itself shut down for about 3.5 months. It just felt so much dread. I think it was hard for a lot of people to focus, but particularly when you have something big like a dissertation to write. And I wasn't sleeping, and I wasn't eating because I was just so anxious. It felt like this never was gonna end, you know, this emotional roller coaster that is the PhD, and I just felt like I was in free fall. Our graduation ceremony was canceled because of COVID-19. I had bought my graduation gown like a year prior because I was like, okay, I'm gonna have this up on the wall so I can look at that when I'm struggling and remind myself why I'm doing this. It's worth it to work towards this future goal of making my family proud, making my community proud. So this is my fancy wizard hat with some beadwork on it. My 2020 tassel. To have it canceled, it was really heartbreaking. And us never really having punctuation to end this process.
Ish. I think it needs another side now.
I want closure on my PhD process, and I have to create my own ceremony of closure. Running seemed like the perfect avenue to do so. As I was working my dissertation, running to honor the many Indigenous scholars I was citing seemed even more appropriate.
Excellent. Right.
That's like 10 miles. It's important to honor these scientists because I wouldn't be here without them. In the run, I want to honor 50 Indigenous scientists along the route. This is gonna be my first 50-mile run. Of course, it's like fears of failure.
Dang, 50 miles. That's 50 miles.
That's 50 miles.
Yeah.
So far. Sometimes you go out for a run and it's really rough and you get imposter syndrome in running, just like you get imposter syndrome in academia. And so I think that part I'm also feeling. But I am confident that I've trained really hard for the last couple of months. All right, team captain, let's make it happen.
Let's do it.
I gotta go run 50 miles. Get a kiss?
Give me kisses.
You were craving, so I brought those.
Ashley reminded me that I probably should be eating more than I have.
I was like, you need a sandwich. You're halfway.
Oh my gosh, my hips. Your body stores up a lot of your emotions, and there's been a lot of transition happening in my life. And you know, I run to like process it, but I think running 50 miles makes you process a lot more. I don't know. feel finally like this chapter of this long PhD journey has come to a close. You just never know how you're gonna change from something. And though it's been long and hard, I think it was a really important and meaningful journey. And now I'll forever be Dr. Jennings. You can't take that away from me.
Hey everybody, come here. We're gonna plant and we're gonna talk about soil. I got both hands are dirty. Get your hands dirty.
I would love to think what Lydia 10 years ago would think of Lydia 10 years later, and the role model that she is for many women and girls and femmes who don't see themselves represented in academia, in sports, in media.
I'm gonna put this soil right here.
There was this fear of working with mining industry that I wasn't a true environmentalist anymore. The conversations I had with family and friends was like, well, it's better to understand the systems that we're gonna have to be operating. And it's better that we have someone who's incredibly passionate about the environment than someone who isn't. And this is a skill that we need in our community. So you should do it. I want to be able to tell children or grandchildren that I did all of my effort to protect this environment. That's our responsibility. And I think that's a Yaqui or indigenous way of knowing and being and living.
Save the river, save the seas, save the mother and her family. How can you take what you want and say that we are free? If you put oil in the water, we won't sit quietly. And they were singing, stay